I constantly say one thing that God has called me, or I like to talk about practicality and pragmatism in Christian life. Okay, so going in that same line of thought, today I'm going to deal with one topic that is very sensitive. Okay, so it's very sensitive. It can be taken either ways. If you go to the next slide, it's about anxiety. Okay, so anxiety. Has anybody heard of it? Okay, so I'm from India. Okay, and this word anxiety is not spoken as much as it is spoken here in the West. And I was thinking why. The reason why is, Indians or Asians altogether, I think a pastor and other, they would all agree that we have this tendency to not accept our weakness. Okay, we cannot accept that we are weak. Have you seen that? But I've seen in the West, people are okay accepting, yes, I'm weak. Okay, so some time back, I was sitting with a very high position, like a man who works in a high position. I'm sure he earns a lot. He makes a lot of money. So we were sitting, and then this person said, I would never buy this, new. I would only buy something, used because I'm cheap. Okay. So he was very proud that he's cheap. You'll never hear it from an Indian. An Indian will never say, I'm cheap, because it somehow emasculates, Asians to say that I have a problem, right? So that's why in India, we don't talk about anxiety, because no one goes through anxiety. Okay, so everyone is dealing with that in their own sweet way. I don't know how. And that's why there are no counselors, there are no mental illness doctors. If you are a doctor, in that side of things, you don't make money or you don't have enough patients. But when I came to Canada, okay, so this was very, very new to me, because everybody talks about anxiety. Okay, and this word anxiety comes in every time there's some discussion. You're like, oh, I was anxious. There's anxiety and all of that. By the way, before I go into our sermon today, since I'm going to talk about this very touchy topic, I want to give you a disclaimer that I totally acknowledge the pain people are going through in terms of anxiety, depression. Thank God I've never been through depression or bouts of all of that. So I cannot empathize, right? I cannot feel for them. I don't know how it feels. But I don't want to keep it light. I don't want to take it lightly and talk about it like it's somebody's fault, okay? But in some part of my sermon, if it feels like I'm undermining the struggles and all of that, I want to say that that's not my intention. And you'll have to listen to the entire sermon for you to, understand why certain points are made, okay? So again, I acknowledge all the struggles and sufferings that are happening, and I also want to acknowledge all the great work that is done by the counselors and, all the doctors who help people cope up with anxiety and depression and bring them out, okay? Saying that, now in the West, there is anxiety. There is anxiety. And anxiety leads to severe anxiety. And then sometimes severe anxiety ends up in depression. And depression matures itself into suicidal tendencies. And it does percolate into acts of suicide. Now, as I'm talking to you, I'm actually counseling someone who has severe anxiety, and I'm working with them, not in the spiritual realm, but in my other worldly work. But a few weeks back, you won't believe, we lost a 22-year-old, my friend's son, who committed suicide, who's part of the church, who's like everybody else, who played drums in the worship team. Okay, I trained him. to play drums. And like another family like us, suddenly I get a news that he took his life. And for some very silly reason, I think he couldn't get a job or nobody knew that he had these tendencies. So this really brought this whole topic into me that the world today is struggling with anxiety, okay? And all of you here, I mean, I can see all of you happy sitting here, thank God for that. But I know many of you go through bouts of anxiety, and many of us go through bouts of anxiety, and some are struggling. We don't show outside, okay? So it is not the world that is only struggling from anxiety. The church, we struggle, okay? Our youth, our elders, us, our leaders, they're all struggling with that. So what I wanted to try and do today was bring a biblical perspective to anxiety, to understand what anxiety is. How does the world define it, and how should we define it? And at the end of the day, how to deal with anxiety in a biblical way, okay? And these are principles, like I always say, these are out to you. You can always evaluate them if you're going through bouts of anxiety or if you think that you are, and evaluate your situation with that and probably draw inspiration or principles out of it. Right? That's all I wanted to do. And one of the examples that I can give you is, the first time that I heard anxiety and the terms around it was my family. We were in Vancouver Aquarium 2-3 years back, and we were standing in line, okay, for the 4D theater. And my son Aaron, right? He can find friends like that. So there was another family that was standing next to us, a mom and son. Okay, and Aaron quickly turned to him and said, "Let's play tag." Okay, and the kid said yes, and these guys started running around. And for us it was okay, but that mom, I can see she was very pleased with that, and she said, "I want to talk to you," and she said, "Thank you for doing this." And again, for someone new to Canada, it's very, very, usual in India, in Indian culture, kids just playing, it's not a big thing. But here she was very thankful. Okay, she said, "I'm very thankful for you." And she said, "Look at my son." And we saw him. He was normal, a normal 5-year-old kid just playing with my son. And she started saying, "Oh, he suffers from ADHD, PhD, LHD." She gave like 5 cases, like 5 acronyms that we didn't understand. She said, "He has this, he has that, he has this." At some point, Cynthia and I was like, "What's his name?" Okay, what's his? And she's like, "I think Jacob or James." She's like, his name is James. Okay. So the reason I'm saying that is, she introduced her son as a patient to us. She said, "Look at the patient who has A, B, C, D, E, 5 problems." And only when asked, she said, "His name is James." And again, I acknowledge that the pain that they might go through, the kid might go through a lot of pain and all of that. But she said something else which really, ticked us off. That she said, "We also have a pet at home which suffers from separation anxiety." That's when Cynthia and I lost it, okay? So you're like, oh, you took dogs, which are supposed to be in the wild, right? Fighting for food, scavenging, right? Surviving in the dark, okay? We brought them in, put on sweaters, right? Put them in the couch, all right? Gave them food 3 times a day. And what we've done, we've also taught them that you have separation anxiety, okay? So that's when I knew that this issue is deep in our society, okay? So whether anxiety or not, whether it's real or not, whether it exists or not, it is there in our discussions and we are all aware of it. So that's when I said, okay, you know what, I should go through it and see that how this is going to work. And so it happened that during the COVID time, I actually went through a bout of anxiety. Because as you know, we were new to Canada and I was just settling down. I have my own company. I I don't work in a big company, to get my salary and all of that. I do contracts, and COVID came, I had to lose a few, and there's so much of anxiety. And I started becoming scared, and Cynthia was there, and I used to go and tell her, and Cynthia used to counsel me. But thankfully, it wasn't as severe as it is. I mean, it was just general fear that a dad or a family person would have, all right? But then, at those times, these principles actually helped me. So this is not just theory, something that helped me, something can help you also, okay? So saying all of that, let's get into those 3 principles. And the first principle, if you can go to the next slide, and this is my first realization. Now one back, yeah. Yeah. So this is my first realization, that anxiety is an, can we all read it? It's an emotion. It's not a disease or a disorder, okay? So this is one thing that the world has taught you and me, that if you are an anxious person or if you have anxiety issues, you are a patient, okay? You are a patient. You're not a human that is just exhibiting an emotion called anxiety, but you are a patient who suffers from anxiety. So what is the difference between emotion and a disease, right? Emotion and a disease. So, for example, headache is a disease, right? And why is it a disease? Because the word itself is dis-ease, okay? You're not at ease. It's dis-ease, right? So something is bothering you, but the difference is that if you have a headache, you go to the park, you still have a headache. You go home, you have a headache. You travel in the bus, you have a headache until you pop in a tablet, a pill, or you go and take rest, or naturally the headache goes away. So a disease lingers with you, okay, until the source of the disease is solved, right? Because if you have a tummy ache, until it is over, it will still linger with you. But emotions are not like that, right? So emotions are very contextual, or, it just happens certain places and it doesn't happen at certain scenarios. So for example, anger is an emotion, right? So there are some people I know that who get agitated by sound. Okay, if there's a lot of noise, they get very agitated or angry. So let's take, for example, I'm that person. I'm standing in a construction zone, and there's a lot of noise. And obviously, my emotion is anger. I'm very irritated at that point. So what do you do? You take me from that place and put me in the park. Or you take me to my home where there's silence. And obviously, I'm no longer agitated because anger is an emotion. It comes in or it shows up when something that you don't like is happening around. So your body's way of saying is, move away, all right? Or deal with it as soon as possible, okay? As opposed to the disease, which will linger. So what I discovered is that the anxiety that you and I have, okay, is not a disease, it's just an emotion. Which means you, me, everybody suffers some sort of anxiety, whether big, higher level or small level. We struggle with anxiety. Even babies do, okay? A 4-month-old kid, he wakes up, it's all dark and no parents around. What do you think the kid is going to do? Right? 1, 2, 3, fit of rage. And then when everybody comes in, so the emotion is fear or loneliness or something. So the kid immediately starts showing an emotion. So humans ought to show emotions. If we don't show emotions, we are robots, right? You're the computer that you have, the phone that you have doesn't have emotions. So if you're showing emotions, and if one of those emotions is anxiety, congratulations, you're a human that God created. So you don't have to beat yourself saying, oh, I have this emotion or emotional disaster. I'm a person with emotional disaster. No, everybody has their bouts of emotional disasters in multiple places. So this is what I would say. If you struggle with anxiety, it is just a display of your emotion, not something you are handicapped with. Okay? And why are you called a patient? Because of anxiety, if you have anxiety issues, because then only you can go to a doctor, you can pay them the money and all of that. So there's a lot of business perspective behind. But bigger than that, there is a spiritual realm. There is a big agenda behind that. Because the more you are worried, the more you are anxious, the more you beat yourself up, the less cheerful you'll be. All right? The less social you would be. Okay? And the more enslaved and entangled you'll be. So the moment if you're cornered and if you're told you're a patient, you have a problem, you have a disorder, it brings our morale down. And what do? The best thing is, no God, no fellowship, we lose everything, and it only makes people worse and worse and worse. So it is just an emotion because Jesus also had emotions, right? Jesus was a human. He had emotions. He got angry. Did he get angry? Not once, twice. I think 6, 7 times in the Bible, he literally, lost his cool. Jesus wept. He went to Lazarus' funeral. And Jesus knows that 3 days later, this Lazarus is going to be back again. So he knows this guy is going to live. Why should he weep? He had emotions. Jesus was anxious just before his crucifixion. He went to the Garden of Gethsemane, and the Bible says that he prayed so hard that his sweat came out as blood. Okay? So his anxiety reached the peak. Okay? So you, me, Jesus, everybody gets anxious. Okay? So don't look at yourself as a patient. When you look at yourself in the mirror, if your doctor, if your counselor, if they say that, oh, you're struggling, you're suffering, you're a patient, the first thing that we need to throw away is the feeling that I'm a patient. No, I'm a creation of God, and God chose me. Last time when I preached, I quoted Ephesians 1:4, if you guys remember. He said, even before the foundation of the earth, God chose me. Imagine if I had to be planned even before the foundation of the earth, how important I should be, right? So if God has planned so much for me, then why should I be anxious about anything? And that's why Romans 12:2 is a verse that we've heard a million times in our lives. What does it say? The first part of the word Romans 12:2 says, do not conform to the pattern of the world. Okay? Why you're not supposed to conform to the pattern of the world? Because the conformance to the pattern of the world is this, that you will have to go through anxiety. You will have to go through depression. You will have to, it's a disease. You're entangled in that mess. So if you are running behind the conformance of the world, you are also like them, like the others who are into anxiety. And that's why John 16:33, another very popular verse that says, in this world, you will have trouble. God said you will have trouble. But take heart, I have overcome the world. That is all. So you will have trouble. Did anybody tell you that becoming a child of God is easy, that it's going to be a cakewalk? No. You will have bouts of anxiety. You will have trouble. But God has overcome the world. So the first point is always remember this. Okay? Anxiety is an emotion. If you are a human, you will exhibit anxiety in various places. So I was telling you about the person that I'm counseling. So when I was counseling the person, I told, I have social anxiety. Okay? And that person said, no, I've seen you, on stage talking. I've seen you all. I said, yes. I started playing music very early, like 14 years, and then I've been in the stage playing music all the time. So for me, stage is not a problem. Put me in front of like 50 people, 100 people. I don't have a problem. But at the same time, I've seen that if somebody invites me to a stranger's place, okay, if somebody says, okay, next week we're meeting with a group of people and I don't know anybody, okay, I'll start being anxious, right? I'm like, oh my God, I don't know, what if nobody recognizes me? What if nobody, I go along with anybody? I started becoming anxious. So I was telling that, I get anxious, all right? You say that you have anxiety, I get anxious. So everybody gets anxious about something. So which means we are just exhibiting an emotion. So that's the first thing. So let's not beat ourselves that anxiety is an emotion. Let's not conform to the world, which says that you're a patient, right? You're struggling, you're suffering. No, I'm just displaying an emotion. The second one, if you go to the next slide, please. Yeah. So this one, again, I struggle a lot with this anxiety because of responsibilities. So, what does this mean? So, in my last sermon, remember I was telling how you and I follow the world, right? So we are asked to follow the world. There is a standard that the world has set. This is what success is. This is what it is. And we are all chasing, somebody else's dream. And at the end of the day, in all those chasing and all of that, we've brought in so many responsibilities. We need to earn money. We need to be successful. We need to have all the pleasures of the world. But the problem with that is, when you have so many responsibilities, what comes along? Anxiety, right? So it happens to me a lot. So for example, let me take an example. So some of you know that I play music, I produce music and all. So when I'm talking to a client, okay, I sit with a client and they say, okay, let's do this, that. I say, yes, let's do everything. Okay, next week, I'm going to deliver this, okay? And the person leaves, and the first thing that I go through is, I need to impress this guy, right? When he hears this next week, my client should be like, John, awesome music. Here's the cash or check, right? That's what my feeling is, right? So I'm very happy about it. But the moment there's pressure on me that I have to excel, the next thing that comes to me is, what if, the output is not the best? I aim for the best, and what if it is not the best? So what I do, I procrastinate. You know the word procrastinate? Which means, yes, I have to do these things, but you know what? I'm scared of this, so I will do that later. For now, I'll relax, okay? And that now becomes longer and longer and longer. It goes close to the deadline, and as much as close it goes, we start panicking. So panic starts coming in because I'm close to the deadline, I have to finish something, and I have not done anything. And all that we do is blame it on anxiety. We say that. I teach at a school, so I hear my students always come to me and say, oh, I didn't finish my assignment. Why? I got very anxious. Why? Because there are so many assignments. My question is, isn't that what you're supposed to do? You're going to learn, right? You're going to study, and you're going to write assignments, right? That's what you signed up for. And what are you saying? There are so many assignments. Yes, that's what you signed up for. Like I'm very anxious. I'm suffering from anxiety, and I cannot submit it, right? So that's one of the reasons that many of us going through anxiety. It's because there are responsibilities that we have to. If we don't do them, we can't earn the money, or we cannot excel in our life. So there's a pressure to earn, to excel, to be at par with the society. But our mental stability says that you cannot. And then finally, these two compete with each other. There's panic, there's anxiety, and then multiple things around this might end up in depression also. So what did I do? So the thing that I did was, the first thing I did was, It's called the first step. Okay, so if you want to go on a travel, let's see, if you want to go from destination A, from A to B, you know what the first thing you need to do? You need to pull your car out of the garage or out of the driveway, right? So you can talk about going in the highway, I'm going to cruise in this, all of that, but before that, you need to get inside your car and pull out of the driveway. That's your first step. Because the moment you pulled out of the driveway, your next destination is the highway, and you can proceed. So that's why somebody said that your first step is actually the 50% of your journey. Okay? You keep your first step, you're already half done. And the remaining journey is just 50% more. Why? Because you and I struggle in that first step. Okay? So when my client says, next week you're going to give me this, for me to start, that's where the problem is, right? That is where the problem. But when I start, I go, right? I finish it. So the first thing is taking the first step, all right? That requires a lot of resilience and ownership to, go and put your first step. But the first step, I always found, is that the first step to do an awful job, all right? Did you get that? To do an awful. So if I decide to do a great job, a fantastic job, I'm always worried that I will not make a fantastic, great job. So what I do is I start to create a bad job. At the end of it, I want a bad job, right? My music should suck. It should be bad. So which means what I'm doing is I have made up my mind that I'm not looking for perfection, but at least I have started working. Okay? And the secret is once you start, whether it doesn't mean whether you're doing a great job or not, once you start doing it, you can always start working on it and improvising it and all of that, right? So I always like this verse in Proverbs 26:13. I quote it many times. 26:13, anybody knows what it is? It says, the lazy man, okay, says, there is a lion in the streets. Okay, I like that verse because this guy is sitting in the house, locked, not going to work, not meeting with his friends, not earning anything, and his reason is there is a lion roaming in the street. Give me the possibility of a lion roaming in the streets of Canada. And that lion targeting you and chasing you and killing you. That's even more impossible, right? But that's how sometimes we behave, right? So we have so many reasons why we don't want to do some things. We justify it in so many ways. We go to the extent possible to say, I cannot do this because at the end of it, nothing works. We say there's a lion on the road, so I can't do it. And that's where the panic starts kicking in, all right? So Jonah, our friend Jonah, that's what he did. When Jesus said, when God said, go to Nineveh, what did he do? He ran away from his responsibilities, took a ship to Tarshish, and he thought if he hid himself in the bottommost floor of the ship, probably God won't find. What an amazing strategy, right? If I go under and hide, God cannot see. But after all the theatrics, the drama that happened, he went into the fish's belly and outside and all of that. When he went to Nineveh and when he started preaching, the entire city of Nineveh gave their life. They repented and things changed. So what was the difference? One time he was running away. And if you actually read the book of Jonah, he says the same Proverbs 26:13 example. So he says, God, you don't know if I go to Nineveh, they're going to kill me. They're going to kill me. So I'm not going to go. What an excuse, right? I'm going to die, so I can't do it. But when he took his first step, when he went to Nineveh, when he started preaching, he was able to change an entire kingdom of people, including the king, to be, to repent and turn back to God. Okay, sometimes we underestimate ourselves, right? This is what we do, I can't do a good job, I don't know. And then we kind of keep ourselves in the backstage, just thinking that I cannot do it. If I do it, I'll do a bad job, okay? And that's why we kind of keep away from responsibilities. And over time, okay, this and these kind of things can pile up and cause anxiety. Okay? So the next time, if you're struggling with anxiety, especially in terms of doing your responsibilities, in terms of completing something, try this. If you have a responsibility and if you complete it there's a sense of freedom. I don't know how many of you have gone through that, right? There's a sense of achievement that I've done this, right? It's a very good feeling. So once you get used to that, you will not go back to the whole anxiety thing, because that's very cruel, right? That journey is very cruel. Versus the other side, when you kind of take the first step, and when you think, I'm going to just do it, and I'm going to improve as I'm doing it, that strategy would help you, just like how it helped Jonah. And Joshua 1, 6-9, if you all, we've heard it, in our sermons. What does it say? It says, be strong and courageous. If you read the promise that God gave to Joshua, at least 3 or 4 times, he keeps repeating, say, be strong and courageous, be strong and courageous, be strong and courageous. Because I chose you, okay? I have a great plan for you, okay? You're doing good. That's what God says. You're doing good, all right? You're great. You're a human. You have emotions, so be okay. Okay to express your emotions. And continue to follow or believe in the great plan that God has. Again, I always like this verse here. It says, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. So if God has a plan for me, right, why should I be worried and anxious about doing things? Okay? So that's the second one. So the first one is anxiety is not a disease. If you struggle with anxiety, you're not a patient. You're just a human who expresses that feeling. Second is, if you try to run away from your responsibilities, or if you're postponing your commitments, it will automatically create anxiety in you, and it's going to get worse and worse. The last thing, the third one, is this one, anxiety because of loneliness. So it again goes, I want to remind you of this world today. Okay, so you and I are living in a society where, we are not social anymore, correct? We are very entangled with media and convenience around. That I've heard people tell me that, oh, I wish there was more than 24 hours, like 26 hours, right? Yeah, I always think, we sleep for 8 hours, right? So 8 hours is our sleeping time, so which gives us another 16 hours. So in that, for eating food, taking a shower, relaxing, all of it, give it a 4 hour. Okay, so if you do 4 hour more for that also, what are we doing with the 12 hours in our hand? Why do we need an extra 4 hours than the 12 hours which is already given to us? And can anybody guess what's happening in those 12 hours? Ask your phone. All right? So there is a thing called screen time in all your phones. Just go there. Then the accounts will tally. Okay? You and I are so entangled today with media, with conveniences of the comfort of the world, that one thing it's an agenda. Again, it is an agenda, and the agenda is to make you lonely. All right. So my son, Aaron, we often bring in his friends for a play date. Right. So a few weeks back, there was his friends at home, 7-year-old. Okay, all of them holding an iPad. These guys walk into our house, they're sitting in the living room, and they're playing on the iPad and communicating through the iPad, sitting, And my friends, me and my friend's dad, his friend's dad were talking, and the dad turned and said, what is the whole point of meeting your friend when you're talking through the iPad? You can very well do it, sitting at home. And it actually brings out the reality of our society today, right? So we are so much dependent on media and the comfort that we've kind of lost the social touch. Okay, we are no longer social. And I'm telling you, humans, God created humans as a social being. Okay, so when he created Adam, what was the first thing he observed? That he was alone. God said, oh, it's not good for man to be alone, so he made another person. And the next promise that God gives Adam and Eve is go, multiply, and become a society. And if that is God's plan, what needs to happen? The devil has to counter that. And the only way to counter that is to take you away from togetherness and to make you lonely. And that's why we have it in our hands, okay? The amount of time that this takes away from our family, our personal meditation, from our children, right? From our nature walk and all of that. Again, we should ask our phones. I mean, I'm guilty of it. I mean, if I show my screen time, I'm also guilty of it. But that's why I always say that church is an integral part of our faith. Okay? This church fellowship, it's not just gathering, singing a song, hearing a sermon and then, going home. It's not a tradition. This fellowship is an integral part of our faith, because what we are doing now here is we are having a fellowship. Okay? We are a family that takes care of each other. Okay? When there is a trouble, when there is a problem, we run to each other, we talk to each other, and we comfort each other. Okay? So Hebrews 10:24, I'm going to read that, and let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together, but exhorting one another, so much the more as you see the day approaching. So in Hebrews, the command is very clear that stir up each other, okay? Exhort one another. By how? How? If you can put that verse on the screen, if it's okay. Hebrews 10:24, it says, by not forsaking the assembling of believers. Okay, so which means get together, okay, and have fellowship. That is something this world lacks big time, okay? So I think I was 22 years first time when I came to America. So I had a work, so my company sent me. I come with my colleagues, okay? I'm the only Christian person of faith in the group that we came. And Sunday morning, I'm in a new country. It was Minneapolis. It was cold. It was snowing. I put my warm clothes. I walked to the reception and say, get me a church nearby. And you know what the receptionist said? Nobody has ever asked me this question. Okay? And it was a day when it didn't have Google like how it is today, no navigation and all of that. So I somehow found a church nearby, and I go to the church. I go inside the church. The church literally adopts me. Okay, I become a member of the family. Like that day, a family says, you know what, Thanksgiving is coming next week. You have to come to our house. A stranger, a brown guy like me, a young guy from India, right, popping into the church. The church took me with them. It was such a surprise for my colleagues. They're like, what? What's going on? Do you know them before? I said, no. Are they your friend's friend? Distant family? Nothing. That's what fellowship is, right? We're all one family, and we take care of each other. And the world will not understand that, right? Because this is a different family altogether. So why would that help, or how would that help in anxiety? Because the world is suffering with that, okay? Children are suffering with that because everybody is glued to their iPads and game stations. And for them, the world is virtual. They don't have real people to commune with, real people to have fellowship or to commune with emotions. They have only computer software that reacts to their, whatever input they give. So for them, when that goes away, or when that is boring, or when that becomes too much, they don't have anything else to side with. And that's when a lot of children today, our youngsters, are going through anxiety and depression. Because for them, the physical connect is not there. So this is a big, my advice to young people sitting here. I know Pastor Jeremy is doing a great job, but this is one of the advice that I always give young people that serve in the church, okay? Just go to a church. You don't have to be a guitarist, a pianist. If you can wipe the chairs, right? Vacuum the carpet. Do something in the church. And the church is the place where you need to build your friendships. And that's something that I tell Abel and Aaron always, my two sons, is that you can have many friends. Okay, just have friends, enjoy with them and all. But your best buddy should be a spiritual person, okay? Just make sure you choose your best friend to be a spiritual person, because they will hold you accountable, okay? When I was growing, I have just two friends, okay? My school time and after school, my college and so far. I have just two friends, both of them great persons of faith. They always hold me accountable. They say, John, what you did was wrong. Do you think biblically what you did was right or wrong? So I have an accountability with my best friend. I can go and trust them and pray with them. I can seek advice with them. And that's the same with not only children, all right, even with families here. You can have many friends, but make sure the family that you are very close with, they're spiritual, so that you together, right, mend each other and encourage each other, and then you build families for the glory of God. And something that I always tell the young people is that, I was looking at, what's it called? America's Got Talent? Yeah, AGT, America's Got Talent. I was looking at that show that day, and there are these judges who are sitting there, and this audience sitting there, and they're expecting perfection, okay? They expect perfection from the contestants. So you go stand there, and in the first 60 seconds, if you fail to impress the judges or the audience, what happens? The buzzer goes off. There's booing. And they said, I was looking at one of the shows where this guy starts painting, all right? He starts doing some random stuff, and he keeps doing it, and the buzzer goes one after the other. The entire crowd is like, boo, go off the stage, and all of that. And after he did everything, he just flipped. And it was such a masterpiece of an art. That's what the world looks at you, right? That's how the world looks at you. They want you to be perfect. Do you have the right, physical, body, whatever looks? Do you have the greatest gadgets? Do you have, everything for them to mingle with you or to recognize you? The world looks at those things. But look at the church. None of that matters. I always tell Abel that, try and play in the church, right? Because the church is the least judgmental place other than your family, right? So if you're delivering a speech, let's say you're going to deliver a speech, you're going to have a lot of anxiety, and you'll be like, oh my God, what's going to happen? But at the same time, imagine you're practicing the speech in front of your grandparents. Okay? Suddenly the same speech, all right? The same recital, piano recital I'm going to do in front of so many people. But suddenly when it's in front of my parents and in front of my grandparents, I'm not as nervous. I'm not as worried. Why? Because that's my family, right? They're not going to judge me. They're not going to boo me. They're not going to, shoo me off the stage. There's no buzzer that goes off. They're going to encourage me. They're going to say, "Do awesome, do a great job," right? That's what they're going to say, as opposed to the world that expects perfection. If you're not perfect, you're going to be sent away. So my advice is, if the world is suffering from anxiety in terms of loneliness, you and I have a great opportunity that God has given a family, okay? Not only this church, wherever you are, if you're listening in the online stream, in another country, wherever you are, God has placed you there among a place where you can go and serve, where you'll be more than welcome to go and serve with them, to have fellowship with them. And the moment you start having fellowship, the physical connect with people, you'll see your anxieties slowly going away, okay? Cynthia and I, that's why our magic, Pastor knows, is that our magic is food, okay? So we'll just invite people and say, Indian food, okay? Everybody's like so happy, and Cynthia makes amazing dosas. So people come home, and so there's an amazing time. So we invite people, and I've opened the invitation to many, and many are thinking to come. And yes, whenever you're ready, please, our house is always open. It's such a nice, Yuvan, I know why you're laughing. But the invitation, invite people. Okay, so if you're good with food, just invite people, make some food, have fellowship, okay? There are people who need that fellowship, okay? Talk to each other, commune with each other, and just like how Hebrews 10:24 says, that consider stirring up each other. Stir up each other, okay? And exhort one another by not forsaking the assembling, okay? So the world suffers in these three things. The number one, they are labeled as a patient. You're not. You're a wonderful creation of God who can show emotions. And yes, there will be troubles. There will be times you have to cry. There'll be times you have to lose your cool. There'll be times you'll have to be anxious. It is a part of your Christian life. If you're doing that, if you're having trouble there, thank God. That is how God programmed all of that to be. That's number one. Number two is, if there are so many responsibilities and if you're keeping them or running away from responsibilities, that would increase your anxieties. And the third one, if you run away from fellowship, from being together with people, that will also increase your anxiety. And the world, again, struggles and suffers with this, but you and I have a beautiful opportunity, because if you go to the next slide, the Bible verse that we read this morning, as the music team comes up, let's all stand up and read this together. This is a promise if you're dealing with anxiety. Can we all read it together? 1, 2, 3. You will surely forget your trouble, recalling it only as waters go by. Life will be brighter than noonday, and darkness will become like morning. You will be secure because there is hope. You will look about you and take your rest in safety. You will lie down with no one to make you afraid, and many will quote your favor. That's your promise. So you don't have to be anxious or struggle with anxiety like the world does.